All right, the light turned red, I believe. So now recording. Okay. How did Jesus separate 1,000 years with a comma? We're going to talk about that today on Deep Dive episode 31.
That was pretty good.
Yeah.
How did Jesus separate? What was it?
Oh, I thought you meant the intro coordination was pretty good.
Oh,
I didn't know you were saying my look. I'm like, yeah, I agree. It was great.
Something new again. This is the summer of George, as Seinfeld would say. We're trying something new.
Yeah, and our usual tech guy, Chris, isn't here today, so I'm going to be switching back and forth between the cameras, which I've already forgotten to do a couple times. So if it lags, that's why I'm trying to split my system resources over multiple tasks simultaneously.
These are growing pains. And by the way, I had no idea that Chris was such a big Donny Osmond fan. I was glad to hear that I didn't know that he was a music buff, but Donny Osmond, him and his wife went to see Donny Osmond because Chris wanted to be there so bad that they got tickets. I think some friends of theirs got tickets. He was giddy as a little schoolgirl.
Yeah,
he was. It was nice to see.
Yeah, our tech guy, Chris, he's out of town today because he and his wife they had that opportunity to go see someone in concert, and they've both been working so hard lately. They needed a vacation, so we let him go for said as long as you're only gone 1 week, in this volunteer position,
and to see Donny Osmond. I mean, since he's such a big fan, we got to.
Yeah, I don't know anything that Donny Osmond does. I probably do. I just don't know I do.
I used to watch him and his sister on their variety show. That was the '70s, man. The Partridge Family and Donny Osmond. And, that was good TV. Man.
I think Marie Osmond, doesn't she host a lot of cooking shows?
I don't know, but
I think so.
She has aged better than anybody I've ever seen. I mean, she looks terrific. Last time I saw her, I don't know when. It was probably on a cooking show or something. I have no idea.
Yeah, I know my wife. She watches a ton of cooking shows, and I'm almost certain that a very common host of those on Food Network, whatever, is Marie Osmond. But I could be totally wrong because I'm horrible with names.
Well, that's Chris. I know he knows. He keeps up with both of them. He has a little journal that he keeps track of. I'm totally lying. I'm just he didn't want to go see Donny.
He didn't want to see him.
Well, he did. Jadell is the one that wanted to go see Donny. And he went along for the trip.
I didn't know that. Okay.
I tried to keep it. I tried to be serious so people would think that Chris was a big Donny Osmond fan.
Well, you had me fooled. I thought he was a Donny Osmond fan.
Anyway, so Chris will be back next week, and he'll take care of the video and everything. So this is, like I said, the summer of George. Does that mean anything to you? Summer of George?
Yeah, because I used to watch Seinfeld all the time.
Okay.
But sorry, keep forgetting to switch the camera. But yeah, we decided, since it's a summer and we can try a couple new things on the podcast, and today is one of those. You've already seen us implement the hook at the beginning.
Right.
That's something we tried to change, but also something we were talking about this morning is try a intro segment where we answer a question generated by ChatGPT that's intended to allow the listener to get to know us a little bit better.
Right, because we are a mystery. You and I, we are a mystery.
A mystery wrapped in an enigma.
That sounds familiar. What
it does. That? It's from something.
It's from something. I know. So just in case you're anywhere near Pensacola, Florida, where we record, and you're challenging that it's summer. Hey, Josh, it's 1,000 degrees outside.
Yes.
I went and rode my bike yesterday. I got there about 9 9:30, it was 90-something degrees.
Mm-hmm.
And I rode about half as long as I wanted to. I couldn't take it. I was just exhausted. It was unbelievable hot. And it's raining this morning. I think the weather said it was going to be 7 degrees cooler. So only 95. Great.
7 degrees cooler in Pensacola in the summer it's still insanely hot.
Man.
Yeah, my wife and daughter, they were just on a 2-week cruise or whatever with my wife's parents up to Alaska.
Yeah.
And so they're up there and like beautiful 70s weather and low humidity, all that kind of stuff. And like just the most picturesque landscapes surrounding them, glaciers and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And they come back to Pensacola.
Get off the
plane. Get off the plane and instantly burst into flames. That's just instantly doused by the humidity.
Yeah. that's the you gotta people move from Florida because of that. They just can't handle, like people move from the north because they can't handle the cold. It's something you got to get used to.
Yeah.
It's a truism for sure. So what's the first topic?
So the first question that we're going to answer today, and we'll do one or two of these each time. But let's see, share a memorable or a funny moment from your childhood. It also says that shaped you into who you are today.
Oh my gosh.
So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that shaped you into who you are today, but just a memorable or a funny moment.
Okay, so I'll go first.
Okay.
The one that comes to mind is that has to do with my buddy Kent, who we lost almost a year ago. This August, it will be a year ago, and we were at a race. I used to live in North Carolina, and where we lived there was 4 NASCAR tracks. Within driving distance where you could go and come back. It was Darlington, Rockingham, Charlotte, and there was another one, but there was Daytona also. That was more than a day trip. But it was, we went to 25, 35 races together. And one was, we were at Darlington one year, and the old track in Darlington, you could sit so close. We would sit in the front row, and that sounds like a good thing. It's really not. It's a good thing if you want to experience the race and feel the cars come by you and the concussion and all that stuff. But this was, the late 70s, early 80s, so safety wasn't really hadn't progressed to where it was now. Now you can't sit. Like if the first 10 rows where you used to be able to sit, now is a no-sit zone, so it's a safe thing, and bigger fences and everything. But it used to be, if you sat in the front row like we did, your legs, you'd have some leg room, but you were restricted because of the wall that keeps the cars in the track whenever they hit the wall. So they hit the wall that your knees are on, right? So it's literally right there.
Okay.
And the wall is whatever, foot thick, whatever. So we would sit at turn 1, and when they come into turn 1, they're at the very top of the wall. So they are within feet of us, doing at Darlington 150 miles an hour. And
pretty loud.
Oh my gosh, loud. Just loud. And there's no communication. And that's one of the points of the story. Communication is pretty much hand gestures, right? So halfway through the race, Kent is sitting to my left, and it would get to a point where you're trying to listen to the radio, and you get to the point where sometimes you just take a break. It's just overwhelming. You take a break and you put your head down. So that's where I was, and Kent tapped me on the shoulder and said, and I knew that meant either going to the bathroom or going to get a drink or something. And I said, no, I'm going to stay here. So he went, and at that point, we had backed up some because there wasn't anybody sitting behind us, right? So we had some room. So we had backed up and stretched our legs out. He was gone to the bathroom, and my head was down. And I happened to look up, and he walked by me, and I knew that was him that walked by me. He was going to sit back down. Well, he had, because we had room, he had moved down a little bit. We were stretched out. I just had this urge. So to stand up. So I saw him come by. I stood up and I gave him a big bam, like a football player, big smack in the butt.
It wasn't him?
No, it was not. It was not him, Josh. It was somebody that I had never seen, and this person had never seen me. And I'm looking at him, he's looking at me, and there's no way to verbally communicate, that, dude, I'm sorry, I thought you were my friend that's sitting here. He's not here now. He'll be here in a minute, and I'll prove that there's no way to communicate that.
So what happened?
I just looked at him, I went, I'm sorry. And I just waited for him to do whatever he was going to do, and I would have taken it. You know what I mean? He'd have decked me, but that's fine. I deserve it. And I sat down. I never saw the guy again, and came back and sat down. And I went, how do I communicate this to him? No, that embarrassed me. I just went on about my life, man. But that,
how do you even tell him about that? It's like, so I was planning on coming up behind you and smacking you on the butt, and it was someone else.
It wouldn't have been uncommon for me to do that, and you know what I mean. That would have been a normal thing that we would do. And I didn't tell him until after the race, and I think I had forgotten about it or something. And I told him afterwards on the way home, and that has been. I told that at his funeral because I did his funeral, and I told that story at his funeral because that is just something that's one of 100 things him and I had been through together that are embarrassing moments. But that has stuck with me, and anyway, there you go. That's
you have
my
a
story.
tattoo. You have a tattoo of his name on your arm.
I do have a tattoo of his name on my arm, and I do. His whole family and I went the day after his funeral, and we got some type of tattoo that commemorated his, his life and how he affected us.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, that's my story. Josh, you're such a straight-laced guy. Nothing has ever happened to you, right? Like that before?
Nothing whatsoever. I'm pretty much deadpan. No, the one that comes to mind was when I was a kid. So I grew up. I first part of my childhood, I grew up in Houston. Second part of my childhood, I grew up out in the middle of nowhere in Chapel Hill, Texas. And when I was in Houston, this is probably when I was maybe like 9 years old, somewhere around there. But my neighbor, there were two boys that lived next door to me, and their dad had converted their entire backyard, almost their entire backyard, into a huge garden, and he used to grow all kinds of fruits and vegetables and stuff in that garden, and just really, really into that kind of stuff, the growing your own food and all that. And in the neighborhood we lived in, right next to us was this huge field that someone kept all their horses and stuff in, and as horses are wont to do, once they're done eating, that food passes through them, and they leave a nice little deposit on the ground in the stalls, and that has to be mucked out and taken somewhere. And so there is a little section of this field that had been sectioned off as the place where they take all the horse poop, the manure, and they just pile it up. Throw a bunch of sawdust on it. It just keeps piling up, and eventually it breaks down, or whatever. But they would offer this to local gardeners or whatever if they wanted to come and get some natural fertilizer or whatever. Sure. They could come, help themselves, take it back to their garden, mix it in their soil, all that stuff. So my neighbor, their dad wanted to go visit this spot in a couple streets over, and he took us with him. Well, we had no clue what he was actually doing. We just knew when we got there are these mountains of quote-unquote dirt piles that we could all play on.
Oh, yeah.
And, they'd just been sitting there drying out in the sun. So it didn't have, it had the normal smell of like a horse pasture, but nothing nothing super significant. Like we didn't realize what was going on, and we're just climbing those things, playing on them, throwing dirt at each other, all this stuff.
What you thought was dirt.
Yeah, what we thought was dirt. Just like getting just straight up dirty.
Gosh.
And didn't really think anything about it, and I don't know why their dad let us do that. Probably just like old country boy, like whatever,
Kids will be kids.
It's natural. But so I remember, not really even thinking anything about it. But when I got home later that evening, just like the look of horror on my mom's face. It's like walk in covered in horse manure,
smelling like it too.
Yeah,
I'm
smelling
sure.
like it too.
Oh,
because by that time we were used to it. And my mom, like, first thing she said is, go take a bath. And I don't know if you've ever experienced dehydrated, sun-dried manure hitting a nice warm bath.
Oh,
that's
goodness.
when the aroma really kicks in.
Is that right?
Yeah, and there's this dirty kid covered in manure, and I hit that bath water, and all of a sudden, oh my gosh, what did I play in? And just like I destroyed that bathtub. There was a ring of manure around that thing when I was done.
Next time, hose you off outside.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow. That's quite, how old
made
were
me
you?
into the man I am today.
Yeah, it shaped your
yeah,
it shaped you are today. How old were you again?
Probably like 9, something like that. Yeah,
that was a good time.
Oh yeah,
that was a good time. Well, there you go. Everybody's gotten to know us.
Yeah, now you know everything about us. We're open books.
There you go. That's the get to know us segment. We'll do some more of that stuff throughout the summer and see what lands and what doesn't. But we are a podcast that is recorded in the church, and we are both of us we teach a class, a gun club, and last night we started talking about AI and how that's going to affect our life and how it affect our life now and in the future and what it's going to look like and all that. We've talked a little bit about that here. We had a podcast about it, which I liked a lot. I really did, and how we consume Bible, how we consume God's word now, and how.
Yeah, that was about 2 years ago, I think. We should probably do an update to that soon.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Yeah.
I think everybody now consumes some part of whatever they're consuming through their phone.
Yeah.
If you're a person of faith, there's really no reason that you can't be influenced by the Bible, just like you're influenced by everything else, by listening to a podcast like this one, or watching a podcast like this one, or however you want to digest information. We're here to do the podcast. That's one of the things that you and I do, and we tend to talk about things that our church has talked about.
Yeah.
Right. And last Sunday we had a guest speaker, and he talked a little bit about Luke 5, 1 through 11. Yes,
he did, and he named the sermon "At Thy Word." And I kind of want to look at the events that led up to Luke chapter 5, because I think it's really interesting.
Luke 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4, 5. That's right.
4. Yeah, 4 comes 4, 5.
Yeah.
It's weird how math works that way sometimes, but yeah. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. And it, in a way, it kind of relates a little bit to what we talked about in the last episode last week about the prodigal son and his father,
right?
And all that stuff. But so the way Luke starts out is there's a structure to it. So there's the 4 Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Luke kind of presents Christ from the perspective of his humanity. That's why the genealogy of Christ going all the way back to Adam is in Luke, because it starts out. It shows like how there's a human lineage to Christ that goes all the way back to Adam. But the way Luke starts out, it starts talking about John the Baptist and his early ministry, and it talks about Jesus getting baptized by John the Baptist, and it starts the beginning of Jesus' ministry. So there's kind of this structure that starts with John the Baptist, transitions who is like the bearer of the word, and transitions over to Jesus, who was the word, is the word, right?
Yeah.
Well, Luke 1's John the Baptist. Luke 2 talks a little bit about Jesus' birth and his youth. That's when we read about his parents losing track of him for a couple days, and they come back and find that Jesus, this little kid, is in the synagogues debating Scripture with the supposed experts on Scripture of the day,
Right.
with other people, and so everyone's kind of astonished, like, what's with this kid, right? And then it sort of transitions there to the end of John's ministry, because he ended up in prison, and then the beginning of Jesus' adult ministry. And when we're introduced to the beginning of Jesus' ministry, he starts out in the region of Jordan. And if you're imagining a map of Israel, you have, on the left-hand side, you have the Mediterranean Sea, and that's where Israel is. And then if you keep going east, you end up crossing the Jordan River. And so on the east side, there's, Jordan, the land of the Moabites, the Ammonites, all that kind of stuff. Well, Jesus was coming from Jordan, crossed over the Jordan River, and entered the wilderness, like region, like northwest of where Jericho was. That's where the wilderness was. That's where he went through his temptation. Okay. Where Satan presented three different temptations for him to either forsake his deity, or to present his deity in submission to Satan's authority, that kind of stuff, right?
Okay, right.
And so we're familiar with that scenario. Well, from there he went up north to the region of Galilee, which is over by the Sea of Galilee. And in fact, in Luke chapter 5, when it opens up, it talks about him being pressed by people that were following him, and it said that he was standing by the lake of Gennesaret. That's another name for the Sea of Galilee. So that tells us sort of where he was. And so after he leaves the wilderness, he goes up north to Galilee, to the town of Nazareth, and spends a little bit of time there. Goes over to Capernaum to the east. Well, in Luke chapter 4, there's a really interesting account of Jesus really making some people mad in the synagogue, and this is in let's see. In Luke chapter 4, verse 13, it says, "When the devil had ended all the temptation, he departed from him for a season, and Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee, and there went out a fame of him through all the region round about, and he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all." This is something we don't often think about when we're remembering all the stuff that Christ did. We think of the turning water into wine, feeding the 5,000, doing all these different miracles, or maybe transfiguration.
I love that. I love the transfiguration. Man, that's such a great study.
We need to talk about that one sometime too.
Right.
But obviously we think of the his death, burial, and resurrection,
Right.
but we don't really think about him going all over the place, stopping in the synagogues and teaching.
Right. The human stuff, right? That's what we're pretty much talking about.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, the human stuff. There's a couple times in the New Testament when people referred to him as teacher,
right?
Which implies that he went around teaching stuff, right? Mm-hmm. And so primarily the places where people were taught were in the synagogues by the religious leaders of the day. Well, he was going around Nazareth. It says he taught in their synagogues, being glorified of all. Verse 16, he came to Nazareth where he had been brought up, and as his custom was, he went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. So there was a portion of the ceremonies and stuff that went on in the synagogue where someone would stand up and would read from the scripture. In fact, they still do this today. Like every day of the year is associated with some scriptural reading.
Okay.
And so what just happened to be the verse or the passage that was being read in this synagogue on this day was an excerpt from Isaiah chapter 61. And so Jesus goes up, he opens the scroll, and this is Luke chapter 4, verse 17, which is pretty much verbatim Isaiah 61, verse 1 to 3. He says, "There was delivered unto him the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he had opened the book, he found the place where it was written, the Spirit of the Lord is upon..." So now he's quoting, right?
Okay.
"The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised, to preach the acceptable year of the Lord." Period. And he closed the book and gave it again to the minister and sat down. And the eyes of all them that were in the synagogue were fastened on him. And he began to say unto them, "This day is this scripture fulfilled in your ears." That was an extremely bold statement to make, because let's jump over to Isaiah 61 and see what happened. See what's going on. So Isaiah 61. Verse 1 starts out, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because the Lord hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He hath sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, comma."
That's
and the day,
comma you were talking
yes.
about.
So in the passage in Luke, he stopped at that comma. What's after the comma? Often, the most important thing is what's missing, right?
Yes.
After the comma, so to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord, comma, and the day of vengeance of our God, to comfort all that mourn, to appoint unto them that mourn in Zion, to give unto them beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness, that they might be called trees of righteousness, the planting of the Lord, that he might be glorified. So there's this really important distinction there, and this is why it was it astonished everyone around him, because they all knew the passage he was reading. They knew it didn't stop in the middle of that verse, but yet he stopped in the middle of the verse and closed the book and said, "This part of that verse, today is the day when that has been fulfilled in your eyes or in your ears."
Wow.
And that comma between the passage that he read and the part of the passage that he hasn't read, we have been living in that comma ever since he made that statement in the New Testament, because the day of vengeance of our God, that hasn't happened yet. That's a reference to his second coming. So what was being alluded to there, and what Christ was not so subtly pointing to, was a very key aspect of his identity. Because from everyone else's perspective, this random guy comes in. Yeah, there's a lot of sort of fame about him. A lot of people are talking about this guy. He's going around doing a lot of teaching, all this stuff. But yet he did something a little bit more serious than just teaching there. He basically said, I'm the guy that Isaiah was talking about back then.
Wow.
Not only that,
statement.
but I'm the guy that when that day of vengeance of our God comes, I'm that same guy. He's basically saying, I'm standing here in front of you telling you that I'm God.
Wow. That is exactly what he's saying.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that was quite a bold statement at the time, because it said, all that, this is verse 22 now, all that bare him witness and wondered at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth. And they said, is not this Joseph's son? and we know from, in past episodes, we've talked about the genealogy of Jesus, right?
Yes, right.
Luke talks about the genealogy of Jesus, and it tracks down through Mary. in the book of Matthew, it tracks down through Joseph. Jesus wasn't Joseph's son. A lot of times in the New Testament, it'll say Jesus, as was supposed, Joseph's son. But Joseph wasn't Jesus' biological father,
Right.
adopted father. So, but anyway, all these people are like, is this not Joseph's son? And he said to them, you'll surely all say unto me this proverb, Physician, heal thyself. Whatsoever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in thy country. And he said, Verily I say unto you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. This is kind of an allusion to Israel's tendency, well, both Israel and Judah, their tendency to never accept the word of the true prophets in the Old Testament.
Okay.
Stephen alluded to this too back in the book of Acts. It's like, every time someone came to you with a message of God, you rejected it. Punishment came, then you accepted the second time. And he used that as a means of presenting Christ. Like, maybe you should pay attention the first time.
Okay.
And but it always says, or Jesus said here that no prophet is accepted in his own country. And it kind of reminds me of Jeremiah back in the Old Testament, because while Ezekiel was over in Babylon prophesying to his people that were in the captivity, Jeremiah was over in Jerusalem prophesying to the people that were still there, saying, don't think that just because you're God's people that you can rise up and fight against Nebuchadnezzar and throw off the Babylonians and all this stuff. You're being punished. There's a 70 years time span here. And they rejected his message. They persecuted him. They threw him in jail. And there are these other false prophets that are like, oh, no, we're God's people. We can do this. God's on our side, all this kind of stuff. And and 3 times Nebuchadnezzar ended up sieging Jerusalem until that third time he finally got fed up and said, you know what? It's done. I'm just going to waste everything. And he came and destroyed the temple, knocked down all the homes, the walls, all that kind of stuff in Jerusalem, just laid it to waste. That was the destruction of the first temple. Well, here it says, no prophets except in his own country. But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elijah sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow. And many lepers were in Israel at the time of Elijah the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian. And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath. Cool thing about Pharisees is when we miss something, the Pharisees are there to get angry at it and let us know like there's something important here that we've missed. And this is a really good example of that, because remember in the Old Testament there's this account of Elijah. He's on his way to Israel. There was a famine in the land, all this stuff. He was on his way to Israel, and he stopped. Excuse me. And he stopped on his way because there was a Gentile widow that needed help, and he stopped and stayed with them and helped them and all this stuff. And here Jesus reminds us, said, there were a lot of widows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when great famine was throughout all the land. But Elijah was sent to this Gentile woman. And then he goes, again, he's like, there were a lot of lepers in Israel at the time of Elisha, but God sent him to Naaman, a Gentile. This was really offensive to a Jew at that time, because Jews were God's people. This is the chosen nation. If the gospel is for anybody, it's for the Jews.
Right.
And Jesus was saying, you remember back in the Old Testament when there was famine in the land and Elijah was on his way to Israel, but he went first to a Gentile woman? Remember when there's a lot of lepers in Israel, but Elisha was sent first to the Gentile guy? Mm-hmm. The gospel, it might be for, it's true that it's for Israel, but it's not just for Israel. In fact, Israel's going to reject it, and it's going to be largely a Gentile thing, the acceptance of the gospel. And he used that as an analogy, and it made them so mad.
As it would, I imagine that it would make him very mad. I mean, this is a guy. I'm looking at it like this, Josh. He's a guy standing on a street corner shouting that he's Jesus.
Exactly.
In our day, right? That's what's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, in their eyes.
Yeah, this is Joseph's son. Like, they all knew him.
Anything good come from?
Anything good come from Bethlehem?
That's right.
No,
of course not.
and Jesus even alluded to that, saying that, of course you're not going to accept me. No prophets accept in his hometown. But that's why, there is such a spread of the gospel throughout the Gentile world. But it said, all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up and thrust him out of the city, and led him unto the brow of the hill whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong. But he, passing through the midst of them, went his way, and came down to Capernaum, a city of Galilee, and taught them on the Sabbath days. I would love to have seen this play out, because here they were in the synagogue. It's on the Sabbath. You're not supposed to work on the Sabbath, for one thing, but they were about ready to work him over.
They were going to take him up on a hill, throw him off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which is technically work. On the Sabbath. So they're really concerned about him, violating law and blaspheming and all this stuff. And they even criticize him later as, healing people on the Sabbath day and all this stuff. They weren't really concerned at all that they were about to work on the Saturday or on a Sabbath day.
I mean, that's what do you expect from a Pharisee?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we do, Josh.
Well, I think it would really been funny to see this whole thing play out, because it says he just walked out from the midst of them. So, like, what happened?
My vision is this. They're all walking this way, and he's the only one walking that way going, they don't know what he looks like or whatever. I don't know, but he's just walking through the middle of them going, I'm going to go over here.
Either that or, some sort of, like, Matrix thing, where like everything freezes and he's just like slipping out or whatever, or like in those cartoons where like everyone jumps on the one guy and it's just this cloud of smoke and chaos and everything, and he just kind of like crawls out from underneath. Somehow, they go from watching this guy teaching to attacking him, and he's just like walking out.
Yeah, that's right. That's
I'd love to know how he did that.
I remember he did it. Yeah. Well, he's done things like that before. He can do whatever he wants to, I guess. At that point, was he doing miracles like that? I mean, was he? I don't know. I mean, either.
Yeah, I would think escaping a murderous mob would be one of those miracles.
It takes some skill, at least.
Yeah,
right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, Bruce Lee did it a bunch.
He did,
but
Bruce Lee can do it.
Anyways, they tried to, they wanted to kill him. It wasn't time yet. He just passed through them, went to Capernaum, and started teaching there. And it says they were astonished at his doctrine, for his word was with power. I don't know. That's kind of an interesting. We don't really look into that too much when we read this whole account in Luke. What he was doing in the synagogues and how angry that made people at the time. Because throughout his whole ministry, man, it was almost like he was accumulating the wrath of the Pharisees until it just got to this breaking point where they're like, we need to just, I know we hate Rome, but Rome has this really cool way of dealing with people. We just need to bite the bullet and say, hey, Rome, can you take care of this problem for us?
Right.
Just accumulated wrath.
Mm-hmm. And that's what they did. I often think about. We talked last week about how we put ourselves in the situation if we were living in Bible days. Mm-hmm. What would we do? And it's so easy for us to go. I would have recognized him. No, you wouldn't. You know what I mean? How would you? I mean, people did, and maybe we would have. But somewhere in your life, you wouldn't have, depending on where you were. You know, I mean, before I was saved, I don't know what I believed who he was if I lived back, back then. I tend to think not. I don't know what that says about me. I'm just trying to be honest about how we can look at these stories and look at the history, and put that and bring that forward to today. You know, how we continue to learn from the Bible and the stories and what has happened. You know, I don't think I'd be a Pharisee. I mean, I'm not that smart to be a Pharisee, and I don't follow the rules that much. But
well, it wasn't just the Pharisees. Also, I mean, it's kind of like there was this split. There were the group of people that believed who Jesus was and accepted him. And there was a subset of that group that were scribes, Pharisees, Roman soldiers, all that kind of stuff. And then there's a set of people that didn't accept it. And there are a lot more in that group, as Jesus alluded to. Yeah. But I think, when we look back at Israel's history, they had this habit of getting farther and farther and farther away from Scripture. I mean, we were talking in closing out the book of Judges last night and seeing how just it wasn't just that Israel got far away from God, but they got to a point where they didn't even realize that his presence existed. Right. And so, Jesus alludes to this a little bit in the New Testament when he's criticizing Jerusalem for, like, if you had actually been studying Scripture like you should have, this should have been a no-brainer. You should have, obviously seen that I am who I say that I am. This was his criticism at the triumphal entry, right? At the end of it, he looks back on Jerusalem and he weeps. And it's like, because you didn't realize that this was the day of your visitation, no stone's going to be left unturned. And sure enough, Roman Empire, AD 70, comes in and just scrapes the ground and destroys everything, like Nebuchadnezzar did back in the day, and destroys the temple. And they still to this day haven't recovered from that.
Josh, how do you spell Pharisee?
Pharisee.
Okay, so I'll close this out with another embarrassing story, if that's okay with you.
Yeah.
Now, my wife, she likes to laugh, and one of the things that she told me, after we got married, is that she liked my sense of humor. She laughed at this so hard. I mean, it was one of those, I think I told her in another room from her mother, and her mother was saying, "Donna, are you okay?" She was laughing so hard. Freshly saved in North Carolina, post college, I went to this Bible study that was a very intense, every Wednesday night, 4.5-hour Bible study, and you have to do homework to stay up. And anyway, it was really intense, and it was one of those nationwide Bible studies, men's Bible study. Literally hundreds of people were there, thousands all over the nation. Can't remember the name of it.
Was it like a Promise Keepers thing or something?
Something like that. Yeah, before Promise Keepers, it was exactly like that. And you had a speaker, and then you broke up into small groups. And in the small group, it was in a room, Sunday school room, just like you would imagine. And we're all sitting around, and we're doing the specific Bible study. And I volunteered to read. So I put my head down, keep in mind, new Christian. I put my head down. I was reading, a little nervous, and it had the word Pharisee in it many times. I don't even remember where it was. Pharisee many times. And I never took my eyes up until I was done reading. And I looked up, and every man in there was staring at me with this kind of a blank look, like, and I didn't understand until, I don't know when, afterwards. I kept saying Pharisee. I was reading. I know that it was Pharisee. I kept Pharisee, the Pharisees, Pharisee, the Pharisee, and the Pharisees did this, and the Pharisees did. So I look up, and every man is looking at me like, "Is this guy okay?"
You just start faking it. Well, in the original Greek, it's not a sound. It's like a hard pH sound, a really, really hard.
I did not have the wits about me to do that, but I knew right off something was wrong, and I didn't even understand until afterwards. I started hearing the word Pharisee. Went, oh, yeah, that's why they thought I was idiots.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back to this Bible study. Anyway, that has shaped me. I've never forgotten.
I've always wondered why, like in the Beatitudes, it's like, blessed is the man that does this. Blessed is, I always wondered, why do we say blessed?
I don't know.
I don't. I always say blessed because I don't know where we got blessed.
Have a blessed day.
Yeah.
I guess it fits. I don't know,
He sneezed, so I blessed to them.
Blessed you. Josh.
Yeah.
We're at 45 minutes, man.
Okay.
Thank you for that for that lesson, and we'll be back next week to do this again.
Yep.
Sound good? We'll have Chris back, and he can let us know how the Donny Osmond show went. I know he was right up front. He was doing this with Donny Osmond. Donny Osmond. I know that's what he was doing.
Well, hopefully, as I switch back to the camera again, I have been not very good at operating this board. I'm hoping that I actually was able to record video, and it didn't wasn't just an exercise in futility. So we'll see.
If not, we still have the audio. We'll upload. All right, Josh. Appreciate it, man.
Yep.
Thank you. Listeners and viewers, we love you. Thank you for listening and viewing, and we'll see y'all and talk to y'all next week.